Hello everyone, welcome to Task IAS. We will continue sociocultural anthropology. In last class we have discussed about nature of culture and today we will discuss about nature of society and this is 2.2. Now these are subtopics that we will cover: concept of society, society and culture, their relationship, social institutions, social groups, social stratification. Although these topics are given in paper 1, but utility of these topics are also in paper 2, where social stratification like caste, social institutions like marriage or family, especially in context of India, there also you can utilize these concepts. Now another piece of information is that PDF of all ethics as well as anthropology lectures are given in Telegram channel, and link of that channel is given in description of video, so please enjoy those PDFs as well. Now society, what is society? So here in all these topics my approach will be to define what is society or culture in simple words. Firstly I will define that concept in simple words, later I will give definition of that concept by famous thinkers, and later what are its classification or what are new changes in that institution. This is my approach to make you understand, but when you have to attempt any answer then you can modify this approach, where firstly you have to define any concept by definition of thinker, so that examiner will have idea that you are not writing just general points but you have some concrete idea. So firstly define by definition of thinker and then give definition in your own words, and after that another subheadings like classification or new changes, anything extra then you can write. Now what is society? So everyone often defines society as an aggregation or collection of individuals. This is simply definition by any normal individual or by any another discipline, but in sociology and anthropology we focus on holistic definition of society. Here society refers not just to a group of people but is a complex pattern of norms of interaction that exist among them. That means here we not just focus on group of people who are part of society, but we focus on complex ideas like what kind of relationship these people have and how this relationship between two is different from relationship with three, and how these differences in relationship vary between one society to another. So all these complex patterns are observed in sociology as well as in anthropology. In terms of common sense, society is understood as a tangible object. That means whatever we can observe directly, whereas in sociology and anthropology it refers to an intangible entity. That means we focus that in anthropology and sociology, so society can't be observed or can't be noticed just by physical means, but it has a inherent and deep meaning. That means there is something like mental construct which helps in understanding social differentiation or social structure, which we realize in everyday life but we cannot see it, because if you observe patriarchal mindset which observed in every society but it can't be physically observed, but it is present in subconscious mind. So although its manifestation can be observed, but its direct presence, especially in educated society where and which also have its presence but it can't be observed physically. So all these points explain that definition of society is not simple and we have to go deeper to understand its meaning. Now Maurice Ginsburg, he defines society as a collection of individuals united by certain relations. That means these individuals have some kind of common idea which binds them together, or mode of behavior which mark them off from others which do not enter into these relations or who differ from them in behavior. That means these are some group of individuals who have certain kind of behavior and this behavior is not observed in other members which are not part of this society. So that means here we notice that in society members have some commonality which is not found in others. And one important thing is that here society does not include only a larger society. This society can be a part of small society. For example, it may be a dance society in any college, it may be a welfare society. So this society terms can vary from place to place. We can sum up the definitions of society into two types. First is functional definition and second is structural definition. So we can define society from two perspectives. From the functional point of view, society is defined as a complex of groups in reciprocal relationships. So here functional view of society is observed. So now in functional view you can even add functionalist school of thought, their point of view. Always remember that you can use your theory part in almost all concepts which are given in anthropology. So here function school of thought have mentioned that society is defined as a complex of groups in reciprocal relationship interacting upon one another, enabling human organism to carry on their life activities and helping each person to fulfill his wishes and accomplish his interest in association with his fellows. Now you can think about Malinowski. According to him, society is like an instrument which help in fulfilling needs of an individual. So that's why his approach is known as psychological approach. Now according to them, it is relationship between different individuals in a society that helps in give and take relationship and helping in fulfilling needs. Now another definition from structural point of view is that society is total social heritage of folkways, institutions or habits, sentiments and ideals. So that means now structural school says that society is complex of different, means not only individuals but different folkways, institutions, habits, all these constituents make society. Now Ginsberg, Giddings take a structural view of society, while McLever, Parsons and Leacock have given functional definition of society. So when you define that this is structural definition, this is functional definition, then in the beginning also you can use these thinkers to define your point. Now characteristics of society. So I hope you have understood about what is society, and we have defined it in simple words, then later by definition of Morris Ginsberg, and later we have defined its utility from two perspectives, that is structural and functional. Now characteristics of society, that means what are the features. Now society means likeness, because if there is something common, then only society can exist, then only people will bind together in any society. So therefore likeness is an essential component of society. The sense of likeness was focused in early society on kinship. For example, in recently also tribal societies, and even during COVID-19 pandemic, now focus on kinship was more. That's why people migrated back to their towns. Now that is real or supposed blood relationship. In modern societies, conditions of social likeness have broadened and out in principle of nationality of one world. So it shows that earlier society definition was limited to kinship relationships, but now in modern society this definition has changed, and you can even consider that students of a school are part of one society. Now workers of any organization or company are part of another organization or another society, and now a bigger society, that is a modern state, and its members are part of another different society. So but they have something common, that is likeness. Now society also implies differences. When we have discussed about different characteristics of culture, then we have mentioned that in culture there is more similarity of ideas between different members. That's why we mentioned that in any culture, followers of that culture have similar kind of behavior. But in society it is not necessary that all have similar kind of behavior, they can have differences. For example, in Indian society, we notice that there are differences on the basis of ethnicity, religion, region, geographical or historical. So all these differences are present, but it is a society. But this sense of likeness does not exclude diversity or variation. Society also implies differences, and it depends on the latter as much as on likeness. So likeness and diversity are both equally important parts of any society. A society based exclusively on likeness and uniformity is bound to lose in socialities. It shows that it is important to have diversity. All our social systems involve relationships in which differences complement one another. For example, family rests upon the biological differences between sexes. So it mentioned that it is important to have differences, and we also respect those differences. Consider now, if there is no variation, then how can evolution can occur? It is both about social as well as biological evolution. So it is this diversity, this hybridization who give birth to evolution, and this evolution and development is needed for any individual or for any society to grow and flourish. So now these differences we can observe even in our families, which is a small society, but on the basis of gender, on the basis of education, on the basis of knowledge, there are differences. Now another important characteristic is interdependence. So it is another important essential element. Family, one of the important units of society with which we all are closely associated, is based on the biological interdependence of the sexes. Similarly, you can say that in marriage also it is interdependence of two partners on each other. Even if we think about a school, then also it is interdependence of teachers and students, which is bedrock of school as a society. Now cooperation is also important. Without cooperation, no society can exist. Unless people cooperate with each other, they cannot live a happy life. All social institutions rest on cooperation. What is social institution? We will discuss it later. But it is important to notice that it is cooperation or it is interdependence which are central features of any society. All societies, it is clear from the above discussion, involve a certain level of association, a level closer and lesser complex than an organism. So it shows that a society and its structure is sometimes compared with organism, because in organism all organs, tissues or cells, all these parts cooperate with each other for proper functioning of any individual. Similarly, in any society, different individuals, community and different parts interact with each other. They cooperate with each other so that any society can function smoothly. Although there are similarities between organism and society, that's why analogy is done, and famous scholars like Durkheim or Herbert Spencer, they have used this analogy to define society. But also there are differences, because in an organism, this tissues or organs generally don't change. Although in modern times it is maybe organ transplantation, but these are very rare events. But in society, these individuals can change. So this analogy can be taken, but there are of course some differences. Like an organism, a society also is a system of relations, but in the society this relation exists between organisms rather than between cells. The constituent parts of society give it to a continuity and structure of its own, so that a study of society cannot be reduced merely to a study of its individual members, because in society also we generally don't focus only on individuals, but it's a complex relationship between different individuals, how customs and traditions define relationship and role and status of different individuals in society. That also matters a lot. So I hope now you have understood. Now next topic is society and culture. in last class we have discussed about culture, its definition, and also society and its definition we have discussed today. So whenever any question regarding or relation regarding society and culture is asked, firstly you have to define what is society by giving definition of thinker and also define culture. Now after that you start to think about their relationship. Now culture is a way of life of people, while a society is an organized interaction, aggregate of individuals who follow a given way of life. That means culture is a particular way of living. So it shows our behavior, our ideas, our customs. But in society there are different individuals, but also focus that members of any society have a certain kind of culture. They follow some cultural traits. That means we can't actually differentiate society and culture because there is some kind of interdependence. In simple terms, a society is composed of people. The way they behave is their culture. So it shows that we consider two different societies like Indian society and Western society like USA, then how members of an family in India will behave or will interact is depends on culture of India. Similarly, how members of family in USA will interact and how they behave is depends on culture of USA. So here family that can be considered as a society. So how members of a society will interact, because in society there is a complex pattern of relationship, so that is decided by culture. So now you notice that it is culture and society which are very interrelated, and also notice that it is culture which will guide behavior of members of society. But also remember that if these people have certain kind of behavior, that means it is only society which will guide or boost any cultural relationship, because culture is social and individual alone can't define any culture. So it is only society which can reflect culture. So now I have explained how society is important for culture and how culture is important for society. I think you got my point now. Now you can think about that early notion of culture was popularized among the anthropologists in order to understand homogeneous societies. In the modern world, the relationship between culture and society is a complex one. Culture is produced and reproduced within the society, and society acts in a certain way that is defined by culture. So I think now your point again clear. Asian society is characterized by Asian culture, and Javanese society is defined by Javanese culture. I have explained you by taking example at country level. You can take it this at state level or different societies within an area. You can take any example. Now culture is produced in a given society within the framework set up by the socio-economic structure. Yes, because if we consider culture personality school, then they have mentioned that if society is very peaceful and they have enough resources, then they focus more on rearing of child. Then parents are peaceful and they focus more on child rearing and less think on about how they will collect food. So that means then those children will be more happier and their culture will be very prosperous, and they also focus on other extracurricular or other activities like arts, dances or any other activities. So now think about that, how this socio-economic situation of any society also drives culture. So this impact and this relationship is complex. Now the cultural processes perpetually occurs among the different groups and classes in a society and also affect social structure. Now society or human society is a group of people related to each other through persistent relations such as kinship, marriage, social status, roles and social networks. Now it mentioned that every society have different institutions like kinship, marriage, and status and roles of different individuals. But these institutions, how will work, that depends on culture, whether marriage is monogamy or polygamy, that will depends on culture. Again, that relationship. By extension, society denotes the people of a region or country, sometimes even the world taken as a whole. Now you can use another thinkers like Malinowski and R.C. Brown. So according to Malinowski, it is culture which is a major determining factor, and culture fulfill needs of individual of an society. But for R.C. Brown, it is society which is more important, and here culture acts as a tool to fulfill needs of society. So these are different points. We have done these theories, these ideas, when we have completed our anthropological school of thought. So more points you can take from there. Here I am just giving you brief ideas that how you can make your points on society, on relationship between society and culture, specifically by mentioning different thinkers. Now culture personality school, now you can use different thinkers like Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, who have mentioned that it is society and culture which are interlinked, and how an society behave determines personality of any child, and this personality will determine how culture of that society will work. So these are interrelationships which you can use. Now we have discussed about society and culture. So now you can say that in conclusion you can mention that it is society and culture which are interdependent and both can't go individually, and scholars like Levi-Strauss have mentioned that this relationship is very complex and society can't grow without culture, and again culture can't grow without society. Now another is social institution. This is our next topic. So what is social institution? So think like in every society there are different ways to organize members of that society, and by establishing different norms, different rules, every society is governed. So these norms or these set of rules take a institutionalized form, take a organized form in the form of social institutions. Now things will become clear gradually. A social institution consists of all the structural component of a society through which the main concerns and activities are organized, and social needs such as those for the order, belief, reproduction are met. So now by these social institutions, needs of individual like reproduction are fulfilled. At the same time, needs of society like law and order situation, peace and harmony between different communities, these are fulfilled. According to Ginsburg, institutions may be described as recognized and established usages governing the relation between individuals and groups. So that means it is a set of norms or principles which guides behavior of different individuals or group in that society. Now there are different social institutions, and some of them are family, education, that is schools or colleges. Now religion, in which temple or mosque or churches. Now in economics there are different institutions like agriculture or any company. Similarly, government is again a social institution. Now characteristics of these institutions. Firstly, social in nature. Institutions come into being due to the collective activities of the people. They are essentially social in nature. So how social institutions are originated? If you think about this question, then think that some relations are repeatedly performed by an individual. For example, it is rise of inequality and surplus by more agricultural production. As we have discussed archaeological anthropology recently, so I am taking example from there only. So if we have more surplus, more inequality, so we think that there should be some social control or some social institutions that will guide how this agriculture surplus should be distributed in that society. So then we will think about some tax or some centralized authority which will guide how different economic activities should be done and should be performed. So this repeated interactions and repeated performance of any task probably that put pressure on human brain to think about some rules, some standards, and that's why different institutions emerged in different spheres. Now, universality, these social institutions are unique and they found in every society. They exist in all the societies and existed in all the stages. The basic institutions like family, religion, property, and some kind of political institutions are observed in every society. So maybe it is a state in modern society, but a band in or tribal organization in simple society. But there are different kind of social institutions which are universal. Now, institutions are standardized norms, and institution must be understood as some standardized procedures and norms. They prescribe the way of doing things. Now, institutions are means of satisfying needs, because by institutions only, like marriage or family or governance structure or maybe religion, so these all institutions have function of fulfilling needs of individual as well as society. Institutions are established by men themselves. They cater to the satisfaction of some basic and vital needs of man. For example, it is a well-established governance system which helps in maintaining law and order situation so that man can live freely. And it is also again this better law and order situation which help in maintaining peace and harmony of a society, which is important for growth of any society. So you can mention these needs. Now, institutions are interrelated. Institutions, though maybe they are diverse, but they are interrelated. Understanding of one institutions require understanding of other related institutions. The religion, moral, educational, political, economic, all these are interrelated. You can even think of that this is if there is more progress on education side, then people think about more rationality in religion dimension. So all dimensions are interrelated, especially in country like India where things are more complex. Then this interrelation is again more important to understand. This type of institutions are essentially interlinked. And this sentence that we should understand other institutions to understand a particular institution, this shows that holistic study is needed. That's why anthropology has adopted holistic dimension in study of any particular social cultural phenomena, or even in biological anthropology also. So this is a unique as well as strength of our discipline. Now, primary and secondary institutions. So what we have discussed is what is social institution, its definition and its characteristics. Now, primary and secondary institution. Now, this is a classification of institution. Now, primary institutions are those which satisfy primary needs of an individual, like food, like reproduction. Now, secondary institutions are those which fulfill derived needs of an individual. Now, derived needs from our political institution is need of an well-established police or need of an law or constitution. These show that these are secondary needs. So any institution which fulfill these secondary needs are secondary institutions. So most basic institutions which are found in any society, even in primitive society like religion, family, marriage, these are primary institutions. These are primary in character. And secondary institutions which fulfills derived needs, for example education, examinations, law, legislation, constitution, parliamentary procedure, and business, these are secondary institutions. Now, functions of social institutions. Here I will give you same broader points. In those headings you can write down some specific examples that we will discuss when we will cover about marriage, family, kinship. So in those chapters you can write down here specific examples so that your answer will look something different. Now, institutions cater to the satisfaction of needs. Now, satisfaction of needs, you can mention about marriage, which will provide a legitimacy to reproductive relationships between opposite sexes. Now, institutions control human behavior. Now you can think about family, where family, especially it is older generation, which act as a social control on younger generation and their activities. Now, institutions simplify actions for the individual because it is these institutions which provide certain kind of procedures. For example, religion or spirituality, which is derived from religion, which guides that individual should do some dana. So these activities provides for welfare activities or taking care of parents. So all these things guide an individual. Now, institutions assign roles and status to individual. Different institutions you can consider, like if political institutions are considered, then it is the democracy, where citizens also have their role and their status as important member of democratic institutions. Now, their role as citizens become important when voting or elections take place. Now, institutions contribute to unity and uniformity. So if institutions guide for particular kind of behavior, that will drive uniformity. For example, in case of family, it is idea or rules of care and cooperation with each other which provides for unity as well as uniformity in their action, because it is unlikely where family will say that one children should go for corruption and other go for honesty. So it is uniformity which is driven by social institutions. Now, but there are some negative functions of institutions. For example, in families, it is patriarchy, which is inculcated by older generation to younger generation and which led to human rights violation of women. Now, religion and caste, sometimes it become very orthodox and they become barrier in path of progress, where intercaste marriages, interfaith marriages will sometimes not allowed, and especially in case of North India or Haryana or Western Uttar Pradesh, where honor killing cases come. So these are some of the negative functions of institutions. So from this discussion you can note that, and you can conclude that it is social institutions which are made by man and which are central for any organized activities and which help in continuity of human welfare and human society and human civilization. But there are some negative traits. So what is needed is that we should adopt and we should promote those institutions, those practices which are good. But for negative practices, it is now idea of rationality or legality which should be taken care of. And now you can also mention that these days social institutions are undergoing changes. Even these caste or religion, these social institutions are also undergoing changes. So social institutions as society are dynamic and we are observing these changes, and there is need of anthropologists and their studies to understand this social change in social institutions as well, like changes in caste system and its consequences. Now, social group. This is another topic. Now, when a human being takes birth, he or she has certain needs to fulfill for which he depends on other individuals. Yes, starting from its dependence on mother, especially during gestation period, and later on family for socialization. So from that time onward, social groups started developing. In this process, he or she interacts with other individuals of society and establish social relationships. And when he enters into school, it is now a peer group starts developing. These social interactions take place between two or more individuals. The whole collection of individuals in which social interaction take place is called as social group. It is the group in form or the other which fulfills various needs of an individual. It provides a medium for social interaction. So it is a group which provide some kind of socialization, some kind of a medium or means by which an individual understands other individuals of society. And it is also these social groups which help in transferring or in enculturation. That means these groups helped in transferring of cultural traits from older generation to younger generation. Now, three things are very important regarding understanding social group. Firstly, group is basic element of society and is concrete phenomena. That means in every society there is some kind of social group present. Even in tribal societies there are some groups. Even if we consider our family, so it is some kind of social group within a large society. Second, a group requires more than one individual, because again this group is a social phenomena. Now third, there is a compulsory interaction between the individuals forming a group. That is, there must be a social relationship. Without this relationship, we can't even think about presence of any social group. Now, according to Talcott Parson, this is a culture that is a basic element behind social relationships. So he considered culture is important for any social group, because if they have similar kind of behavior, similar kind of needs, then only these social interactions will take place, and these social interactions are need for growth or origin or continuation of any social group. It is the culture which defines the pattern of behavior in a group which are shared by all members of society. These shared norms or patterns define the roles of members and differentiate them from non-members. So again, if these common behavior which are hallmark of presence of any social group, which are different with non-members of that particular group. Now, Anderson and Parker, they have given a comprehensive definition of group. According to them, groups are units of two or more people meeting in same environment or overcoming distance by some means of communication who are influencing each other psychologically. So they have mentioned that it is grouping of two or more people, which is understood by common sense, and they have same environment or same cultural sphere or overcoming distances. That means they are coming closer, and it is not only physical but they have focused more on dimension like psychologically. Why this psychological dimension is included? Because in today's time, earlier social groups like kinship, now they have reduced in their importance, or their importance have reduced, but other social groups like peer group or group of workers in any organizations become more important. And although these peer group may be differentiated in geographical terms, but they have more psychological closeness. So this is highlighted by definition of Anderson and Parker. Now, recurrent nature of interaction among the group members makes the group one of the most stable social units of society. So society is a larger, it is not possible to have continuous interaction with all members of society, but these social groups, due to their small number and small size, there is a recurrent nature of meeting or interaction between different members of group. That's why these social groups are more stable. Important classification of groups was made by C.H. Cooley. According to him, these social groups can be divided into primary and secondary groups. In primary groups, generally people are organized into smaller groups. They have continuous as well as direct communication between them. So you can consider it as kinship or a family, which is an example of primary group, where the relationship is more kind of obligation as well, where it is mandatory from social perspective for an individual to have interaction with his kin groups. So primary group are those groups in which a small number of person come into direct contact with another. There is a sense of mutual cooperation, companionship, and sharing of personal feelings. These are small groups and every person necessarily belongs to any of the primary groups. So these are mandatory because as Aristotle defined, human beings are social animals. So they need some groups or some individuals to express their feelings or to share their anger. So this social relationship, especially within a social group, is important for any individual. And due to this nature only, during COVID-19 pandemic, people faced some mental stress because it was this action or restrictions on social relationship or social outing was against our mental construct, against natural working of our brain. Due to their important nature, they form the nucleus of our social organization. That means they are cornerstone or they are important for any society. Cooley considers family, playmates of children, neighborhood and community groups and groups of elders as primary group. Now in secondary groups, the relations are more formal, impersonal, segmental and utilitarian. In secondary group, one of the important characteristics, they have utility. So now people came and form a group to fulfill their needs, and as these needs are fulfilled, there is no obligation to continue that social group. These groups are less intimate as the level of interaction is restricted at a formal level. They do not give close identity to its members as primary groups do. So now even caste group or kinship group are primary group, but secondary group, now you can consider any association which is formed to fulfill any particular needs. That is an example of secondary group. In secondary group, we very often interact with people of diverse background because we need their services and we have certain obligations to fulfill. In case of utilitarian or contractual obligation, there is no need to develop personal relationship. So again, which is these personal relationship are important feature of primary group. These relations remain based on reciprocal needs, hence members of these groups regard each other as means, not an end in themselves. Again, this is an important line. Now they have voluntary membership because it is voluntary on an individual to come and form a social group, which is mostly for fulfill their needs. Now they are larger in size, that's why they don't have personal relationship, and direct communication is also not observed generally. They have indirect communication. So we have discussed social institutions and social groups. Now we have discussed about different classification of social groups as well. Regarding what is the importance of social group, you can write down and extract points what we have discussed about social institutions. For example, in social groups, you can think that they fulfill individual needs, they fulfill social needs. Individual needs in the sense that they provide some kind of psychological, emotional, physical support. You can write down these points. In case of society needs, you can think that these social groups which provide for a certain kind of interaction and interlinking, which is important for maintaining social control as well as for maintaining peace and prosperity in society. Now another dimension that you can write, that in today's time, importance of primary groups is decreasing because now, especially in metropolitan cities, value of kinship relationship is reduced, but now contractual or utilitarian relationship, that is relationship between working groups or relationship between high class individuals, which are living in same apartment, or they have same kind of economic standards, which is a formal relationship. So that importance is increasing because now relationship also became more utilitarian. So now you can think about these changes which are observed in social groups. Now another topic is social stratification. Simply, stratification means that there are different strata or layers existing. When we discussed about social stratification, it shows that there is some kind of pyramid of social status is existing. That means some individuals are higher level of society, they have more privileges, but some are living at lower strata. If we discuss particularly about India, then we can discuss about Varna system or caste system, where Brahmins are given higher status, but it is Shudras and later on untouchables who have lower status. So this is a social stratification on the basis of caste. And if we discuss another example, that is on the basis of class, then it is higher class which have higher status, and it is lower class which have lowest status, and then the middle class. Now social stratification is a society's categorization of people into socio-economic strata based upon their occupation, income, wealth, social status, or derived power, social and political. So this social stratification can be on the basis of different means. As such, stratification is the relative social position of person within a social group. So of course this is a social phenomena, because if there is only one individual, how we can arrange it hierarchically? It is a social phenomena, and secondly it is legitimized by that society, and it is of course relative position of higher and lower in that particular categorization. Within a social group, category, geographical region, or social unit, the categorization of people by social strata occurs in all society, ranging from complex state-based society to tribal and feudal society. So it says that although this stratification is more prominent and highlighted in modern society, but some kind of social stratification is also exist in tribal and feudal societies, and are based upon socio-economic relationship among classes of nobility and classes of peasants. If we discuss about tribal societies, although they are considered as homogeneous society, egalitarian societies, but if we go deeper into their structure, some kind of hierarchy or some kind of stratification is observed, maybe on the basis of gender. For example, it was earlier mentioned that it is in hunting and gathering society, the hunting part is done by man, but gathering part is done by women. So here it was observed that some kind of stratification is also there. And if we go by other case studies, then some kind of leadership, where that leadership may be efficient in more hunting and gathering these skills. So on the basis of these skills, that leadership can be decided, and some kind of differentiation on the basis of property, that property may be one extra pig or one extra horse or one extra camel. That can be anything, or that can be very small, but some kind of stratification is generally observed. Historically, whether or not hunting gathering societies can be defined as socially stratified is an debatable topic, because some section believe that these societies also have some kind of stratification, but others denied. Some agreed that social stratification begin with agriculture, and common acts of social exchange remain a debatable matter in the social sciences. And who believe that social stratification existed in hunting gathering, but they also have given this point that although there was a stratification, but this stratification should not be confused with discrimination, because in present society it is not only stratification but it is also discrimination. For example, untouchability, that is some kind of discriminatory practice, but in hunting and gathering society, there can be some minute stratification, but discrimination was absent. So although, but this is a debatable topic, so different thinkers have different point of view. An open class system is a stratification that facilitates social mobility. Now another concept is social mobility, which we will discuss in detail later, but simply social mobility means how an individual can move in any social hierarchy. That means if this is an hierarchy, how that individual can raise his status and go on the top of that hierarchy, and how this mobility can be downward. In open class system, this social mobility is possible. Open class system is where stratification is based on the merit system or education or economic system, which is open. That means if one individual get educated and got a well set professional job, then his status will be increased, with individuals' achievement and personal merit determining social rank. The hierarchical social status of a person is achieved through their effort. So open class system gives opportunity to an individual, and its status that is based on family background, ethnicity, gender or religion, which is also known as ascribed status, becomes less important. So in open class system, it is focus on individual achievement, and any inherited status which is ascribed by birth, maybe because of his birth in a royal family, because of his gender or because of his religion, these are here secondary factors. They have less importance in case of open class system. And if we consider closed system, so in closed system these factors are important, that is family background, ethnicity, gender and religion, and in this closed system social mobility is less, and these are ascribed status. For example, caste is a form of social stratification which is a closed system. It is characterized by endogamy, hereditary transmission of lifestyle, which often includes an occupation, status in a hierarchy, and customary social interaction, and exclusion based on cultural notion of superiority. So caste simply means any social stratification based on by birth, where caste status is described by birth of an individual in a particular caste, and there are some restrictions between interaction of different caste, and generally one caste is defined by its occupation and its status in that particular society. So another important part is that caste is a closed system. That means if an individual born in a particular caste, then it is very difficult for him to change caste status, and it is difficult for an individual to change his caste status. But overall this caste status, that means if we caste A, then its overall status in that hierarchy can be changed. This is done by means of Sanskritization. So these are topics of paper 2. I am just giving their hints so that you can correlate paper 1 and paper 2, and your answer will look more holistically. Because if you are writing answer of paper 1, then also think that you are writing for an exam UPSC which is conducted in India. So if you write examples from India, then your answer will look more holistically and more reliable, and your credibility of your answer will be more. That's why I am giving you hint. And what is caste, how it is changing, that we all will discuss in paper 2. Now stratification is the result of the struggle among people for scarce rewards, and it persists in society because the have and have nots, and it determines, that means here exploitator, that means higher caste people you can consider, are equipped to preserve their advantage position by dominating and exploiting other local or vulnerable people who are denied some benefits. For you can connect it with education system. So in earlier ancient India, or later on in medieval India as well, it was higher caste people who denied education benefits to lower caste people. So when some benefits of modernization or jobs will came, so it was earlier educated people who take benefits of those opportunities, and lower class people stayed very vulnerable. And that's why this stratification, which was originated on the basis of varna system and later caste system, which have another theories of origin, but later on this economic or political dimensions also added their existence of stratification. That means another factors like education or political representation also became one of the reason for continuous stratification in Indian society. And similarly in another societies or class based society you can consider, where it was education or digitalization in modern times. So lower class people don't have access to digitalization, that's why they are not able to take benefits of digital jobs, and they continue to remain at lower strata of pyramid. So it is these features of have or have nots that led to continuous stratification. Now class conflict over material privilege and power, those who own the means of production, capitalist class or the bourgeois class, and those who sell their labor, worker class. So according to it, there are origin of some class conflicts, some caste conflicts because of this have or have not dimension. Now Marxist theory, according to it, it was capitalist class who control means of production and they exploit labor class, and it is the fruits of labor of the labor class that is taken by this capitalist class. So according to him, the profits of capitalist is due to the exploitation of labor class. So again this theory explains why there are again conflicts between different classes of people, and all this led to some kind of socialist society where everyone have equal opportunity and equal access to resources. So what all we have discussed in stratification is what is stratification and different kinds of stratification, especially in India, which is caste system, and how this stratification continued for a long time, and how this stratification led to more violence and more riots in present times. So class conflicts or caste conflicts have originated. Now another topic which is related to this social stratification is social mobility. So movement of individuals or groups from lower to higher status or vice versa in a social stratification system is called as social mobility. So these ladders show that someone can rise up and also some can goes down. These social mobility phenomena operate intragenerationally, that means social change during the lifetime of one individual, or intergenerationally, changes in the social level of a family through two or more generations. That social mobility or change in status can take place by two means: upward mobility or downward mobility. So if you think about social mobility in Indian context, then the scholars like M.N. Srinivas have explained that it is the social mobility between caste system and different phenomena that he have given, like Sanskritization, which define that how social mobility take place. Now this social mobility can be take place by different means, and it can be because of changing one's occupation, marrying into a different family, and movement involves a change in status with no corresponding change in social class. That means it is saying that it is the status which an individual, firstly maybe that is individual have a status of A, but later its status improved to status B. Now there can be a political region. Some of the important regions are described here. Firstly is political region. Some people move to escape from political oppression and racial discrimination. So now you can link it with apartheid movement in Africa. So by abolition of that racial discrimination, now the social mobility of people, especially African black people, their social mobility increased. Now religious liberty, some people move to enjoy religious liberty in response to existing religious persecutions in their country. So if some countries like China, who is famous for execution of their minorities, if those minorities got their right, then the social mobility of those communities will increase. Similarly, if any country start more oppression of their minorities, then the social mobility of those community will decrease. Now economic factor, this refers to desire of people to seek better food supplies, workers looking for better living. So if someone get a good job, then its mobility increased. And otherwise, if some, you can also consider an example where businessman lost his wealth and also his property, then its social mobility is downward. Now educational opportunities, some avail themselves of educational opportunities prevailing in other areas due to presence of colleges and university in other areas. So you can think that if someone have got good education system, then it is one of the most important ladder in social mobility, and people generally migrate to other areas to get benefits of education or occupation. So that migration is also related sometimes with their hope of and their expectation of better social mobility opportunities in other areas. For example, if someone from lower caste people who are suffering a lot from untouchability or discrimination in their villages, then they go for migration into cities or urban areas, so where they will have more equitable treatment. So that's provide some kind of social mobility to them. Now natural or man-made calamities like floods, volcanic eruption or earthquake, they provide a sudden destruction of material wealth as well as some kind of social wealth as well. Because if people are migrated due to some floods or volcanic eruption to another areas where they don't have any social contacts, then this social wealth also destroyed and the social mobility is downward. And now you can connect this current pandemic where small and medium families, especially these small enterprises, they have lost their livelihood, their business was stuck. So now their social mobility is on downward side due to COVID-19 pandemic. Now there are different processes which are given in syllabus of paper 2, like Sanskritization, Westernization, Modernization, Tribalization. So you can connect their definitions here. For example, Sanskritization, that means when a lower class people or tribal people try to imitate features of higher caste, generally higher caste people, or sometimes maybe features of dominant caste people. So this imitation of their traits is generally known as Sanskritization. Now Westernization and Modernization, where people of Western countries, their modernization features are considered as a reference point and people try to imitate their behavior or their lifestyles. And similarly, tribalization, some lower caste people try to imitate tribal way of life, tribal egalitarian nature. For example, Todas of Nilgiris, they have some kind of urban lifestyle. So nearby people, especially of lower caste, try to follow their lifestyle to elevate their social status and to come out of this social hierarchy of caste system. So these are different processes which are given in our paper 2 and we will discuss them later. Now status and role, these are two important terms and these were given by Ralph Linton. According to him, this status and role, these terms like culture have to be used with a double significance. So if we discuss simply what is a status, so status simply means any status or importance of an individual in a social hierarchical system. What is the status given to an individual by social members? That is, what is status of an individual which is given by social group or that society. So social status consists of a ranked position in a social hierarchy or a stratification system and an individual social standing in a society. A status as distinct from the individual who may occupy it is simply a collection of the rights and duties. So it shows that if an individual has some status, maybe at point A or maybe at point B, so its status is related with some kinds of duties and rights. For example, if someone have a status of central patriarch system in northern India, especially in joint families, though, then he will have some kind of duties of maintaining that large joint family, as well as he will have certain rights that younger generation or entire family members have to follow his orders. So these are some kind of status and its characteristics. Now, status and roles are interdependent. Role, you can consider that what kind of role that is expected from an individual. For example, its status consists of many related roles. The set of roles associated with a single status is called as role set. There is no complete agreement through a society about expectation of each status. Now you can consider a woman who have role of a mother in household and role of a professional in an organization. So she have a status, that is woman or a wife in a home, but she have a role of a mother, role of wife, and role of professional in organization. Now you can consider role of a teacher as well as role of a father. Now an individual have to follow all these roles. Now, in fact, the social organization consists of status and roles. Most people are accustomed to talking in terms of status while referring to various particular people and qualifying the term by more common words such as higher and lower. It simply means there can be different roles, and these roles are generally complementary, because if we consider someone as teacher, then there must be another individual who is performing role of student. If we are saying someone as a father, then another member generally who is following role of son or daughter. And in status, this status term is defined by Ralph Linton, and you can also differentiate into a ascribed status or achieved status. Ascribed status, that means which is inherited by birth, that means caste status or kinship status. But achieved, which is due to achievement of an individual, his personal achievement, that means he may become a teacher, he may become a civil servant. So these are achieved status. And these status also sometimes related with roles, because every status, if someone is teacher, then its status have some associated role like teaching. So now his role is of a teacher. So this is a some social phenomena, and which is related with our society, though. So I have discussed them. So thank you so much. In next class, we will try to cover more topics. And if you like these lectures, please like, share and subscribe Task IAS. Thank you so much.